I'm going to be taking you through the process that I use to wrap and fletch my arrows. In a previous video I showed you guys trimming up or cutting the carbon arrow shafts there for the arrows for my son's bow. I've already gone through and trimmed my arrow shafts. Figured no sense in showing that again. So usually I start out the process using the AAE Max Clean Arrow Wipes. I saved one arrow here to show you guys, but basically just wipe off the arrow shaft where we're going to stick the wrap, clean the junk off it, and then set it on the dirtiest mouse pad you have. And then for arrow wraps, I use them from arrowwrap.com. Not a sponsor, but I like them because I can buy them in whatever color configuration I want, and I can buy them in whatever width I want. So I'm not subject to, you know, a pre-cut width. Once I know the circumference of my arrow, I get them a few thousandths over, so I have minimum overlap, and these do seem to fit well, and they seem to adhere well. I haven't had any issues with them. However, one thing I would tell you, don't get any brake parts cleaner on them, or any type of acetone. I like mine with the fade going dark to light. It's my personal preference. You can literally get these designed however you want. I'm pretty simple. So I peel them, and I find the best way to do it is stick them on a mouse pad, and you'll see why here in a minute. And then, this is all personal preference, I like to leave my arrow wrap down off the arrow shaft, 1/4 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch, somewhere's in there, so that way there, if the end of my arrow gets hit when we're practicing and it, you know, ruins a nock, I like to be able to see the end of the carbon to make sure there's no cracks or splinters or anything there that, you know, I have to throw my arrow away. So that's the only reason I do that. You can certainly run them right straight up to the nock end if it's your preference. When we shoot indoor 3D, our arrows get smashed and hit a lot, so I tend to shoot a cheaper arrow, usually if we're shooting indoors, and then I also don't run the crest all the way up to the end. I like running arrow wraps because when the vanes, you know, when the arrows do get hit, particularly shooting indoors, or even, you know, shooting yourself, you know, you hit a vane, you hit a fletching, it's a lot easier to peel the crest off, take all of the fletching off, than it is to try to scrape the glue off your carbon shaft. So, anyhow, on my mouse pad here, definitely not a sponsor, I have an area in which I set it so I can run my nock right up the edge. I get on my arrow crest and I wrap it, and it just repeats the process the same every single time. So that's how I choose to do mine, and I'll show you, and you'll see. So I take my arrow wrap, I have it sitting there sticky side up, have it the direction I want. I have my arrow lined up with the edge of my mouse pad. I simply run it up into it until it hits, and as soon as it hits, you just roll it, and that's it. And then I just give her a roll on the mouse pad like so, and there it is. Your arrow is wrapped. We'll be using Last Chance Archery's Vane Master Pro for doing our fletchings. We're just doing a standard 3-vane configuration. I'm going to be using a 2-degree left offset. The cool thing about this is once you buy the tool, you can do a 3-vane, you can do a 4-vane 90 degree, or you can do the 4-vane 105 and 75 degree configuration. So you can do all the different vane configurations. You can do them up to 5 degrees of offset, left and right. I chose the left because my arrows naturally turn left coming off my bow. When I shoot it with a bare shaft, they naturally want to spin left. Highly, highly debatable topic on the interweb, whether it's necessary or not. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know. I just do it that way because I do it that way. I have never tried running a right offset or a right helix on an arrow that naturally turns left. However, I've seen videos on the interweb where guys have done that and have had no difference in the results. So I think it's personal preference. However, people will argue with that till they're blue in the face. So pick your poison there, folks. Now, these arrows from Victory are already spine aligned, and they have a mark on it showing the stiffest part of the spine. So it's right here, spine aligned. I have checked with Victory to ask them if this is an accurate assessment of where the spine is, and they tell me that it is. It is not just a print indicating that the arrows are spine aligned. It is actually the stiffest part of the spine. So on my bow, I like to shoot the cock feather on the stiffest part of the spine. I want the stiffest part of the spine facing up off the riser. So that's where we're going to start. I've got it set here in our jig. So when I turn it and it clicks in, that our spine, the stiffest part of the spine, is going to be our odd colored fletch. And it's going to be, should be, if all goes well, lined up with the spine aligned portion of the shaft. So that way when we put it in our bow, you guys can't see it because my lighting and photography sucks, but when we stick this in our bow, that should have the stiffer part of the spine up. I suppose if I'm going to continue to do videos down here, I should invest in some better lighting. So the deal is with this, it does have a lot of adjustments on it. It allows you to move your arrow forward and backwards. There's way more adjustments on this than I'm going to go over as far as your vane configuration over here, where you can set your fletching here, how you can adjust your right and left offset over here by moving the pin, tipping the whole device here. I have it set how we're using it. Like I say, 2-degree left offset. The thing with it is you have to be consistent and you have to put in your fletch. When you stick your fletch in the jig, stick it in the same spot each time. If you're refletching an arrow that's already been fletched, make sure you write down all your settings that you have this set at. As far as I know, there is no mathematical equation to find out where your fletching goes from the nock end to the arrow shaft. There's lots of videos on that too where guys have experimented by sticking them way down the arrow shaft, way close to the nock, and have had no discernible difference in results that I've seen. I set mine up so I have face clearance. So when my bow is at full draw and I'm at my anchor point, I know darn sure that this fletching is not touching my face or my beard or any part of my head. So I set mine approximately an inch down from the center of the arrow nock. So do your own research on that. And as far as setting it in the jig here used to have a little black mark here, which is pretty well worn off. I can't see anymore. But you'll see. Once you put the first one on, just line the other 2 up or the other 3 up with it, and you'll be good. You'll see. So we're going to use the AAE Archery Max Weld primer pen. I just hold my vane once it's in here, run the primer pen down it. I count out 10 Mississippis. We'll be using the AAE Max Bond Maximum Strength Vane Adhesive, not a sponsor. All the stuff you can buy on Amazon or through Lancaster Archery or wherever you buy your archery supplies. I do like the Max Bond because the tip's really tiny. I've got several others. I've got some mowing glue. I've got some tack glue. I try to buy whatever glue the vane manufacturer recommends with their vanes. I don't know why it all smells the same. It's probably all the same stuff. And then I just put a light amount on here. I'm not squeezing it right now, I'm just kind of spreading it around. It smells like super glue. And we just take and pull it into our arrow. And then I count out about 10 Mississippis as I hold this here. And you have to make sure that when you pull this in, we just totally stuck this on the wrong spot, like a ding-dong. What an idiot. Did you see what I just did? We don't even have the spine aligned at this point. That's what happens when you get jibber-jabbering. Because that's where it's supposed to be. Cut! Freaking jerk. So let this be a lesson to you folks. Take 2. This elastic band here just goes on the end of the arrow. It's adjustable here. Push the button, you shrink it in a little bit, and it makes sure that the arrow has some tension on it to keep it back into the jig, if you will, into the slot. Now, here's the vanes we're using. We're going to bust out a new one here. Take 2. We will reload it into the jig. We will reprime it. Typically when I'm doing this, I'm down here just listening to some classic rock and in my own little world. Now that I'm trying to make excuses, we will make sure that we are latched into where we want to be. We will reapply our adhesive. As far as how much adhesive to put on, that is something you will learn after a while. It is always my problem of putting on too much. That's too much. Let's see, we are latched in at the spine line part. We have our odd colored fletch, and now we're pushing in to count out 10 Mississippis. And what I was going to tell you is when you're pushing the tool into the arrow shaft, I like to back it up with my other thumb, because if you push too hard, you're going to pick it up out of this notch and have the wrong placement of your fletching. Usually when it's in this flat position. You'll see. So now that we've counted out 10 Mississippis, I pull out, I look it over and admire the fact that I did not completely goop it up with adhesive. I then take a Q-tip. You can do this when you're all done. I just run across there and get any little bit of adhesive that's sticking out. I don't see any. It's my habit to take my finger, push down just on the tip of the vein, just to make darn sure that's stuck well. And then I'll often break one of the Q-tip ears off, so I just have a flat wooden piece here, and I just go along the fletching to make sure it's pushed to the arrow shaft. I've fletched up some of the tack veins, and they fit super tight. I noticed these AAE Maxes, which I've really come to enjoy and like shooting much better than the tacks. I noticed that on this jig they don't always push right tight to the arrow shaft, so I usually just go along with the Q-tip here just to make sure that they are definitely pushed down all the way and you have max adhesion. So we were on this setting, we just take it to the next click. We load up our next vein. I set it approximately where I think it needs to be. I come in here and I roll my other vein down to it, line it up, I push it in, make sure it's right, start to finish, then I pull out. Get the primer pen, you're going to start seeing some repetition here. That's why we're only showing one arrow. We prime it, blow on it, count out a few Mississippis, get some glue, glue the whole length of it. I then go smush it around. I know some guys put 5 or 6 drops down through it as they go. You make sure you're clicked in. Back it up with your thumbs. Count out some Mississippis. Hopefully you guys can see what's going on here. I think you're going to get the gist though. After you count out a few Mississippis, I spin it around. Wipe up any excess, which I'm not bragging, but I've been getting a lot better at. Usually about your 12th arrow you have it down to a science. Again, I just go through and very lightly push down on the vein just to make darn tootin' that we have good adhesion. Leave it in the next position, load up your third and final vein if you're just doing a 3-vein setup. I get it set perfectly with the last one I stuck in there. Lock it in, pull out. You're starting to see the process, aren't you? And that's it, folks, and you're done. We just have to glue an outsert on this arrow here, which I haven't done yet, But there's our crested and fletched arrow, ready to rock and roll and ready for deer season. To go over some of the products that I did use, of course you guys have seen the Cool Flex that I used on the inserts on the other arrows, on the outserts on these. As far as the vanes, again I use the AAE Max Hunters. I've been very impressed with these. They steer broadheads very well, especially shooting a fixed blade, assuming your bow is tuned well. And then I use the AAE Max Clean Wipes. I use the AAE Max Bond. And then the AAE Max Weld Primer Pen, which you can buy in the AAE Max Adhesion Kit. Not a sponsor, of course. However, that's the best way to buy it. Unfortunately, unless you have a bow shop, this stuff oftentimes will go bad before it all gets used. We have enough people in our family that shoot that typically will get most of the life out of that stuff, but not always. And then again, I'm shooting some Victory VAT TKOs and a 300 spine. I shoot a 70-pound bow. I'm running a 50 grain outsert up front, and I'll put another 100 grains on top of that with a broadhead or field point. And then the arrow wraps are brought to you by arrowwrap.com. Made right here in America. And like I say, you need to know the outside, you need to know the circumference of your arrows to order these, because you can order these in multiple different widths. And always have a little bit of an overlap. So these only overlap a few thousandths. As you can see, the seam comes right here. And, you know, also take into account, you know, it changes your FOC on your arrow depending on what vanes and nock and, you know, wraps you're shooting. It all starts to add up as far as weight. So if that's a big deal to you and you're calculating out your front of center, you know, keep in mind too when you're ordering the length of your wrap, you know, how much weight is that going to add. So that's it. Oh, and I guess most importantly, but not least, is Last Chance Archery Vane Master Pro. Protected by U.S. patent number 8517362. Cool little tool. Lots of options with it. That's why I like it. You buy the one tool, you have to buy separate the 4 vane wheel for the back. After you do that, it's ready to rock and roll. It gives you tons of options for fletching your arrows. So if you want to play around and experiment, just buy one tool. It's a great little tool in my opinion. I've used it quite a bit. However, I'm a little biased because I haven't used a lot of other fletching tools. So that's it, folks. You just got to repeat this process however many more times you have arrows. So one thing I would tell you, folks, is once you're done with the process, you have everything done, you've been methodical about it, and these things are nothing but carbon copies of each other. You did the best job you could. Write it down. Write down exactly what you did. And keep a log of it. I just keep a log over here in a book. And it seems silly, however, once you get your bow tuned and it, you know, a year or so has gone by, you're like, man, what did I use for adhesive on those? What was the exact length of the bear shaft? So those are things you're going to want to write down. The brand and model and spine of your arrow, the overall length of the bear shaft, the overall length of the bear shaft and the nock, the overall length from the outside of the outsert to the end of the nock. The weight of the outsert, the overall weight of the arrow with and without the point. You know, get an arrow scale, get it weighed, figure out your front of center. You know, what percentage of my arrow with the weight configuration am I running? You know, these are all good things to keep track of. What was the brand and model of your fletching? What was the crest length, thickness, width? I mean, it seems ridiculous, but once you have your bow tuned so perfect, you're going to want to know, you know, what's flying out the end of it, and don't always rely on the fact that you're going to remember it. Also, what was your vane configuration? What was the offset or helix you put on it? Was it 2 degree, 3 degree, left, right? Was it just offset? Did it have a helix to it? And then some silly things are like, what adhesive did you use? Because if you find that, you know, you're out there shooting when it's 70, 80 degrees outside, it's great. You go out and start shooting in cold weather, and all of a sudden veins are flying off. Oh crap, what did I use? You've got 4 different brands sitting on the shelf. Which one was it? Well, I think I know. It's best just to write it down. So keep that in mind. And the other thing, what I like to do, particularly with spine-aligned arrows, whether you've checked them yourself with a spine checker, is on your arrow nock. There's always that reference point on a nock. I always run it so it touches my thumb when I load my bullets, particularly if I'm shooting a 4-vein configuration and I don't have an odd-colored cock vein. I will always reference my nock mark. And then something I do when I shoot an outsert is I always have the number facing up. So it's just a good visual reference. When you're out and you're shooting, you load it in your bow, you can feel the nock with your thumb, you have the reference of the cock vein, and you see, you know, a distinct mark. So if you, and like I said, this is usually more particular, is usually more important when shooting a 4-vein configuration, particularly if you're shooting a 4-vein 90-degree configuration. That's what I've noticed, that's what I've done. And it also will alert me to problems very quickly. You know, as my nock moves, something's not right. And the other thing I do is I always keep a couple bare shafts, exact same weight, length, brand, size, everything. Because when we go to broadhead tune, we're gonna want to shoot a bare shaft. I have found that if I take my bow, I set it up, which hopefully we'll be able to show you guys. I do have a new bow on order. Once we set up the bow, I get my center shot perfect, so that string and arrow and everything's moving right down the center the best it could. Sometimes I will paper tune it to get me somewhat close, but I'm a big bare shaft tuner. I love bare shaft tuning, and I find that if I get my bare shaft to fly and group perfectly with my fletched arrows, then the fletching has less of a job to do. It doesn't have to steer the arrow as much, and my broadheads shooting a fixed blade will almost 99% of the time fly exactly where my field points do. So that's all to come in later videos, folks. But you just have to remember, I am not an archery expert. I'm not an archery pro. I am a trial and error guy, and I've done and do what works for me. So work your way into that comment section. The questions, the comments, put it all down there, folks. And we'll see you on the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.